Why was she always the one nobody seemed to notice? The dust at Camp Phoenix never truly settled. It clung to uniforms, to skin, to breath, wrapping itself around every movement like a second shadow. Soldiers marched, joked, shouted, cursed. It was a place alive with noise. Yet in the middle of that chaos, there was one space that carried a strange quiet. The med tent. Inside, the air smelled of iodine and sweat. Art monitors hummed like distant crickets, steady and soft. That's where she lived. Every single day, without fail, her name was Mills. No one knew if it was her first name, her last, or just a call sign. They never asked, and she never offered. She wasn't the type to tell stories around the fire pit. She wasn't the type to raise her voice at shift changes. She didn't flirt, didn't smoke, didn't linger after hours. She just worked. Smooth hands, firm grip, eyes that didn't blink when blood sprayed across canvas walls or when a bone cracked under pressure. To most of the base, she was invisible. The girl in scrubs, some thought she was a contractor, others guessed an assistant. Maybe even someone filling out paperwork. She never corrected them. She let them think what they wanted, because moving unseen had its advantages. She heard more that way. When she lined up for chow, she listened to every word spoken behind her. When she sat in the corner of a briefing room, her gaze always locked on the door. Soldiers assumed it was habit. It wasn't. It was survival. But beneath that quiet presence was something heavier, something sharper, something no one at Camp Phoenix had dared to imagine. Every morning, her rhythm was clockwork. Wake at 5:00. Run 5 miles through the choking dust, shower, dress, and head to the med tent. She checked supplies with an eye so meticulous it unnerved the younger medics. Scalpels laid out like rifles before inspection, gauze aligned like ammunition magazines. She scrubbed the tables herself. Though privates offered to do it, she always declined. "I think better this way," she'd say. But the truth was different. Idle hands had memories. They remembered things she wasn't ready to relive. Once, a young private joked about how she never smiled. She didn't answer. She just tilted her head, finished wrapping his ankle, and later left a training manual on his cot. One line underlined in thick ink: "The calmest person in the room is often the most dangerous." The private never joked again. She didn't seek power. She didn't crave respect. Yet there was something about her presence like a puzzle with missing pieces. Soldiers saw the edges, the competence, the silence, the efficiency, but no. One could see the full picture. Rumors filled the gaps. Some swore she was ex-ranger. Others said she had worked with Delta. One soldier claimed he'd spotted her in a photo from Mosul, standing just behind a decorated commander during a medal of honor ceremony. Nobody could prove it. Nobody could disprove it. Ever seen combat? A young medic asked her once. Her answer was simple: everyone's seen something. The kid never pressed again. What no one knew was that Mills had seen more than something. She had crawled through ditches filled with blood, her own boots filling with the weight of it. She had pressed her hands against wounds that refused to close, whispering to dying men while enemy rounds cracked the air above. She had carried silence like armor, because silence was power, and that's why her uniform told no stories. No patches, no combat medic badge, no campaign ribbons, just one name: Mills. What confused people most wasn't her skill. It was her choice to hide it. Why would someone who clearly carried experience, real, blood-earned experience, choose invisibility? Why erase her past? But Mills knew something they didn't. Power didn't come from decorations on fabric. Power came from the quiet ones, the ones who didn't need to prove anything. At night, she slept in a corner of the med tent, her cot tucked behind supply racks. She never locked her footlocker. Inside, only one photo: an old man with steel gray eyes, a metal pin crookly to his chest. Her grandfather, Vietnam, he had been her teacher. Her compass, her silent ghost. He taught her to shoot, to sharpen knives, and more than anything to listen. When people are scared, they talk, he told her. If you stay quiet, they'll tell you everything. She lived by that rule. She became the observer, and yet no one, not even Sergeant Dunlop, the head medic, the one person she occasionally spoke with, saw what was waiting beneath her calm surface. Because no one at Camp Phoenix had ever seen her snap. Not yet. It happened. On a day like any other, the sun burned mercilessly overhead, baking the camp in a furnace of heat. Soldiers dragged themselves from one tent to another, sweat carving trails in the dust. Around 14:30, two Humvees roared through the outer gate, their metal shells shredded with bullet holes, windshields cracked like spiderwebs, blood smeared across the side panels. The doors burst open, men spilled out, one soldier screaming about his leg, another with half his cheek gone, others pale and silent, slumped against the desert-stained vehicles. Mills was already moving before the engines cut. Nobody knew how. She always timed it. Some said she had a sixth sense, like she could smell chaos before it arrived. "Litter team, now." Her voice was sharp, controlled. She dropped beside a bleeding corporal, her hands pressing firm against the wound in his thigh. With the other hand, she cut away fabric. Blood pulsed fast. Femoral artery. She didn't flinch. Clamp, pack, wrap. "Move." A young medic froze, staring at the red flood. "Don't freeze." Mills snapped without even glancing up. "Either help or get out." The kid moved fast. Within minutes, 3 soldiers were stabilized, tourniquets improvised, wounds packed, makeshift supports fashioned from mop handles and folded towels. Mills never asked for perfect tools. She asked for one thing only: survival. Then came the sound. It started faint. Slurred voices, heavy boots. Laughter that didn't belong in a med tent. Soldiers stiffened, eyes darted. 4 men pushed through the flap. Not medevaced, not called, not injured. Drunk, arrogant, pissed off. They wore National Guard patches, but their postures screamed indiscipline. "Where's Grant?" One of them barked. "That bastard owes me $100. No one answered. The men prowled the aisles, knocking trays aside, laughing at the patients. One leaned over a groaning corporal, as if inspecting livestock. Mills rose slowly. "This is a medical zone," she said, her tone flat. "You're interfering with treatment. Step outside." The largest of them stepped forward, square-jawed, twice her size, smirk curling across his face. "Oh, we've got a nurse with an attitude. How about you fetch me a soda, sweetheart?" Laughter erupted. Another mock saluted. Mills didn't move, didn't blink. Her eyes didn't study his grin. They studied his stance, his shoulders, his wrists. Every inch of him measured like an equation. "I won't ask again," she said. Out now, the laughter died. Square jaw leaned closer, testing her silence. The med tent seemed to hold its breath. Heart monitors beeped slow. A single fly buzzed against the canvas ceiling. Then his hand shot out. He grabbed her wrist and time stopped. For one suspended heartbeat, the world froze. The tent, the patients, the medics. Even the dust in the air seemed to hesitate. That's when Mills moved. Her wrist twisted, not away but into his grip, leveraging his strength against him. She spun under his arm, snapping his elbow joint with a sickening crack. His roar cut through the silence as his knees buckled. Before the others reacted, her palm struck the second man's solar plexus. He folded, air stolen from his lungs. She yanked him forward, using his weight to throw him across a supply table. Instruments crashed. The third swung a fist. She pivoted, parried, drove her knee into his thigh. He staggered. She swept his foot, dropped him flat, her boot pinning his spine. The fourth turned to run. 3 strides. She caught his collar, slammed him against a support beam. His skull bounced against the pole, and he crumpled. 8 seconds. That was all. The tent was silent again, but this silence was different. Heavy, stunned. 4 men lay scattered like broken furniture. Medics frozen in place. patients staring wide-eyed, breaths caught in their throats. Mills calmly adjusted her sleeve, picked up a fallen roll of gauze, her breathing steady, pulse controlled. The corporal she had saved moments earlier whispered hoarsely, "Holy hell." No one else moved, not yet, because in those 8 seconds, the invisible medic had become something else entirely. And though she said nothing, though she offered no explanation, no pride, no warning, the truth had already spread. This was not the girl in scrubs. This was something far more dangerous, and it was only the beginning. Who was she, really? That was the question hanging in the air long after the 4 men were dragged out of the med tent like bags of broken furniture. No one said it out loud. They didn't have to. Every soldier, every medic, every patient who had witnessed those 8 seconds carried the same stunned thought in their chest. The MPs arrived first, hesitant, almost reluctant, as though even they understood the tent was no longer neutral ground. They looked at the crumpled bodies of the National Guard soldiers, then at her, at Mills. She stood calmly, gauze in one hand, tape in the other, continuing her work as if she had never been interrupted. The MPs weren't afraid of the drunks. They were afraid of her. The commanding officer entered moments later. His eyes scanned the scene, the groaning men on the floor, the medics frozen in place, the patients wide-eyed and pale, and then finally settled on Mills. "Mills," he started, his voice rough, but the words died before they reached the air. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Instead, she gave her only order of the day. Her voice steady, measured, not raised. "Get them out of my tent." The CO hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. The MPs obeyed, and just like that, she went back to work. The spell was broken, though the silence lingered. Private Jensen, the youngest of the medics, stood frozen in place, gauze still clutched in his trembling hands. He couldn't look away from her. He had seen movies about Navy SEALs and Rangers, read books about heroes and legends. They all looked the part: broad shoulders, scarred faces, tattoos etched into hardened skin. Mills didn't look like that. She looked like someone who could disappear in a crowd. Ordinary, forgettable, but no one in that tent would ever forget what they had seen. By nightfall, the story had spread across the base. It began with a corporal who had been stitched up on one of the cots. He whispered it to a buddy in the chow line. That buddy carried it back to the barracks by dinner. Squads were murmuring about it between bites of powdered potatoes by midnight. It had crossed the wire. Some versions said she'd taken out 6 men, not 4. Others claimed she had choked one unconscious with nothing but 4 tubing. But the numbers didn't matter. The point was the same. The quiet medic had revealed herself to be something else entirely. By morning, she had a new name, 8, because that's how long it had taken her. 8 seconds. Someone even sketched a patch of black background with a red cross in the center. 4 tally marks slashed across it, and the number 8 stitched in blood-red thread. They tried to hand it to her. She declined without hesitation. "I don't need patches." But the soldiers pinned it to the med tent wall anyway. A symbol, not of violence, but of readiness. Sergeant Dunlop, the head medic, watched it all quietly. He had worked with her for months, spoken to her more than anyone else, yet even he admitted he didn't know her. When asked how good she was, his answer was always the same: better than most. Now he understood how much he had underestimated. Later that week, the commanding officer reopened her personnel file. He had skimmed it when she first arrived. Nothing had stood out at the time. She was a medic, a transfer, papers stamped and clean. But now, with new eyes, he realized what he'd missed. 3 combat deployments, 2 Bronze Stars, a Joint Service Commendation Medal with Valor, certifications in Tactical Combat Casualty Care, Urban Warfare Medicine, and Hostile Environment Response, fluent in Dari, qualified in Krav Maga, Army Combatives Level 2. And at the very bottom of the stack, a letter stamped in red from her last commanding officer. Sergeant Mills operates with precision under fire. Do not underestimate her silence or her stature. She is trained, capable, and lethal if provoked. The CO sat back in his chair, the file heavy in his hands. He rubbed his jaw, muttered under his breath. We've had a ghost sitting in our tent this whole time. Back in the med tent, the air was different now. Soldiers nodded at her when they passed. Officers, once dismissive, now made eye contact. Some even called her ma'am by mistake. She ignored it all. She continued her routine. Woke at dawn, ran 5 miles, scrubbed tables, checked supplies, treated wounds, trained alone. Her cot remained in the same corner. Her grandfather's photo still tucked beneath the pillow. But every motion she made now drew eyes. She didn't wear a patch. She didn't need to. The base had already seen what she was capable of. One afternoon in the chow hall, a young medic, a woman, barely out of her training, approached her with shaking hands, tray wobbling as she tried to balance it. Sergeant, would you train with me?" Mills looked up, expression unreadable. "You want to fight?" The girl flushed, "Not fight. Just, I want to be ready, like you." Mills studied her for a long moment. Then she gave a small nod. "Tomorrow, 0600. Bring gloves." That's how it began. The next morning, 2 people showed up. Then 5. By the end of the week, 12. They didn't come to watch. They came to learn. Mills didn't waste words. Her instruction was sharp. Efficient, brutal. She didn't teach them how to win fights. She taught them how to survive them. Soon, soldiers from other units heard the rumors and drifted to the training yard to watch. Even a visiting ranger lingered at the edge of the group. "She doesn't fight like Army," he whispered afterward. "She fights like someone who's been outnumbered." And walked away. The nickname stuck. 8. Mills didn't embrace it. Didn't reject it. She simply ignored it. But the soldiers around her carried it like a banner. Late one night, Dunlop found her sitting on her cot, boots off, wiping them clean with surgical alcohol. The med tent was dim and quiet. "Did you ever want something else?" he asked her. She didn't look up. Like what? Recognition, promotion, a job stateside. She paused, setting the boot aside. Her eyes softened as she looked at the old photo of her grandfather. "I didn't join for the medals. I joined because no one came for him when he needed it. I wanted to be the one who shows up." Dunlop nodded slowly. He had no response to that. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "Hey, Sarge." He glanced back. 8 seconds is just a number. It's what I had to do, but it doesn't define me. He gave her a long look. "Maybe not, but it's why they finally see you." She didn't reply. She went back to scrubbing her boots, silent as always, because she knew the truth. She wasn't here for the stories. She was here for the wounded, for the dying, for the ones who couldn't fight for themselves. And when hell broke loose again, she would be there, hands steady, heart locked in, because 8 wasn't just a nickname anymore. It was a warning. Why did command call her in at dawn? The message came quietly, delivered by 2 MPs, who looked almost apologetic as they approached her outside the med tent. Mills had just finished wiping blood from a cot, her sleeves rolled up, her face calm. "As ever, Sergeant Mills," one of them said, clearing his throat. "Command would like you to report in." Now, she didn't ask why. She didn't sigh or hesitate. She wiped her hands on a rag, tossed it into a bucket, and followed inside the CO's office. The air was heavy with formality. The commander sat behind his desk, a JAG officer beside him with a thin folder of papers and glasses perched low on his nose. "Take a seat," the CO said. She didn't. She remained standing, boots rooted, eyes steady. The JAG officer adjusted his glasses. "This is about the incident involving the 4 National Guard soldiers in the medical tent. They were interfering with treatment," she said evenly. "I asked them to leave. They refused. One grabbed me. I responded appropriately." "Appropriately?" The CO repeated, testing the word. I neutralized the threat with minimum force. She answered, voice level. None of them required critical care. One of my patients could have died if they had remained. The JAG frowned. The CO leaned back, studying her as though trying to read a puzzle he hadn't finished. Mills, we've got a dozen witness reports saying you took out 4 men in 8 seconds, without a weapon. You sure you haven't trained with any special units? She was silent for a beat, her eyes holding his. I trained with whoever let me in the room. No bravado, just truth. The CO exhaled slowly, exchanged a glance with the JAG. Then he spoke. This isn't a reprimand. You're not in trouble, Al. The reports are stacked in your favor. We just wanted to understand who exactly we've got working in our med tent. She gave a half shrug. You've got a combat medic, that's all. The JAG closed the folder. You're cleared, Sergeant Mills. She nodded once, then left. Without another word, back in the med tent, word of the meeting traveled fast. Soldiers expected her to be punished, maybe even reassigned. Instead, nothing changed. She returned to her cot, her supplies, her routines, but nothing was the same, because now everyone looked at her differently. Patients sat straighter when she passed. Medics listened harder when she spoke. Even officers carried themselves with more respect in her presence. The story of 8 had become wildfire. One corporal, who had been patched up during the incident, told his squad that she wasn't human, that she moved like time bent around her. By the next morning, soldiers whispered about her in the mess line. By the end of the week, her nickname was scrolled across notebooks, stenciled on helmets, whispered in barracks. 8, not a number, a symbol. She never acknowledged it, but she couldn't ignore what it was becoming. Her quiet drills at dawn were no longer solitary. Each morning, more medics showed up, some nervous, some eager, all of them curious. They watched her run, spar, and work through combat movements as though she had done them 1,000 times before. When asked to train them, she never gave speeches. She never promised to turn them into warriors. Her words were simple, clipped. You don't fight to win. You fight to survive. She showed them how to disarm, how to break free from a chokehold, how to use the edge of a stretcher as a shield. Every move stripped of flourish, reduced to the raw essentials of survival. The soldiers learned quickly. They had no choice. Mills didn't slow down. Even visiting units began to take notice. Special Forces operators came to watch her sparring drills. One ranger, older and seasoned, shook his head after observing her. She fights like someone who's been outnumbered and lived to tell about it. By the end of the week, the medics who had once frozen in trauma drills were sharper, faster, steadier. Word spread beyond Camp Phoenix. Soldiers passing through began whispering, "Have you seen 8?" It wasn't mockery. It wasn't gossip. It was respect. But respect didn't erase curiosity. One evening, Sergeant Dunlop stood outside the tent with his coffee, staring across the dusty field. Private Jensen, still carrying bruises from her training sessions, leaned beside him. "Who the hell is she, really?" Dunlop muttered. Jensen crossed his arms. "She says she's a combat medic, but she fights like a Tier 1 operator." Dunlop didn't answer. He'd been around medics for 15 years. He'd seen tough ones, smart ones, burned out ones, but never anyone like her. Later that night, he pulled her file from the office again. He read it slower this time. Born in Akron, Ohio. Enlisted at 19. Top 1% of her medical class. Certified in combat trauma, surgical response, urban field rescue, 3 deployments. Fluent in Dari. Scored in the 98th percentile in hand-to-hand combat. 3 confirmed battlefield saves under enemy fire at the bottom. A faded note scrawled in pen. Declined commendation. Said medals don't stop bleeding. Dunlop sat back, the file heavy in his lap. She wasn't hiding anything. She simply didn't feel the need to explain herself. That was the difference. The next day, 2 MPs appeared again. One tall, bald, nervous. "Sergeant Mills," he said. "Command would like you to report for another debrief." She didn't blink. "Now?" "Yes, ma'am." She set her rag aside and followed without hesitation. This time, the CO's tone was different, more guarded, more cautious. "You've started something, Mills," he told her. "People are watching. Medics are training harder. Morale's shifting. What you're doing isn't in the manual." She didn't respond. He leaned forward. "But it's working." There was a long silence. Finally, she spoke. "They're not learning to fight. They're learning to survive." "Duh." Co nodded slowly. "Then keep teaching." And that was it. The drills became official, though unofficial in name. Every morning at 0600, the medics gathered in the yard. Mills led them, wordless, precise, relentless. By the end of the month, half the medical corps was there, not to watch, to fight, to survive. Someone drew her patch again, the red cross, the tally marks, the number 8, and pinned it to the wall of the med tent. She refused to wear it. "I don't need a symbol," she said, but she never tore it down, because she understood what. It had become not a badge of violence, not a trophy, a reminder that quiet didn't mean weak, that invisible didn't mean incapable, that sometimes the calmest person in the room was the most dangerous, and that the woman who healed you could also break you. That night, Dunlop found her again, sitting on her cot, cleaning her boots. "You know they're calling you 8 now," he said. She looked up, the faintest flicker of a smile ghosting her lips. "They can call me whatever they want. Doesn't change who I am." "No," Dunlop said softly, "but it changes how they see you." She said nothing. She didn't need to, because deep down she already knew. And though she hadn't asked for it, though she hadn't sought it, she had become something more than a medic. She had become a warning. Why were the suits watching the medics at dawn? They weren't supposed to be there. Not in pressed uniforms. Not with clipboards and polite expressions that didn't belong in a war zone. Yet on a cold morning, as the sun bled over the horizon, an inspection team stood at the edge of the training yard. 4 civilians in tailored suits. 1 retired general, silver hair slicked back. Hands clasped behind him. They didn't belong. They didn't sweat. They didn't breathe the same air as the soldiers grinding through drills in the dirt. But Mills saw them anyway. She saw everything. Her medics were in full kit, sweat pouring, grappling in pairs. 1 corporal dropped into the dust, disarming. A mock attacker with a sweep so sharp it kicked up grit. Another stabilized a wounded partner while shouting orders, voice cracking but firm. Mills circled them slowly, arms crossed, eyes scanning, every movement precise. The retired generals. Voice broke the silence behind her. "What is this?" The CO stood stiff beside him, his jaw tight. "Combat Medic Readiness Program." He said carefully, "Unorthodox, I know, but effective. This isn't Army doctrine." "No, sir," the CO admitted. "It's survival." The generals. Eyes flicked toward her. Mills didn't stop moving, didn't acknowledge him, didn't care if he was watching. After a long pause, the general said quietly, almost to himself, "She the one from Bravo?" The CO blinked. "You know her?" "I read the file," the general murmured. "Didn't believe it. Now I do." They didn't shut her down. They couldn't, not after seeing the results. Morale was climbing. Drill performance was sharper. Response times during trauma simulations had dropped by minutes. Even infantry squads respected the medics now, because they trained like fighters, not just healers. Still, the inspection team scribbled notes, whispered to each other. Bureaucracy always whispered. Mills ignored them, because the battlefield didn't wait for paperwork, and 2 days later, the battlefield came calling. The radio call cracked through. The still air like a gunshot. Convoy ambush, 12 miles out Simbi. Multiple wounded. Enemy retreat uncertain. There was no hesitation. Mills was already moving, loading gear into the truck before the CO finished giving orders. 5 medics, 2 drivers, 3 packs of blood, 4 trauma kits. no backup. The road to the ambush was long and choking with dust. Engines roared, hearts pounded, but Mills's pulse didn't spike. It sharpened. When they arrived, the world was on fire. 2 Humvees wrecked. One flipped on its side, another burning, flames clawing the sky. Soldiers crawled for cover. In the dirt, groaning, bleeding, screaming, gunfire cracked from the hills. A sniper's echo thundered across the kill zone. Mills didn't hesitate. She leapt from the truck and sprinted low through the chaos, bullets snapping against the dirt near her boots. Her hands found the first soldier. Thigh wound pumping arterial blood. Clamp, pack, wrap. Done. Move. Behind her, her medics fanned out like a team drilled 100 times. They weren't panicked. They weren't frozen. They were sharp, focused, because she had made them this way. Tourniquet now. She barked, and the medic obeyed without question. Hands steady under fire. Mills ducked behind the flipped Humvee, found a corporal unconscious, pulse faint. She tore open her kit, tourniqueted, applied pressure, sealed the burn wrap. Then she saw it. A flash of light from the ridge, the glint of a rifle scope. Sniper. She had seconds. No cover, no time to shout. So she did the unthinkable. She stood right in the open, hands up, not in surrender, in challenge. For one suspended heartbeat, the battlefield seemed to pause. Then the shot cracked. It missed her shoulder by inches. Before the echo faded, a burst of fire roared from the ridge. Dunlop, hidden with a rifle, took the shot. The sniper crumpled. Mills dropped instantly, rolled back into cover, and resumed care, as if nothing had happened. By the time backup arrived, 5 soldiers had been stabilized because of her team's speed, because of their grit, because of the training no one had wanted. When the convoy rolled back into base, the medics stumbled out covered in grime, in sweat and blood. The camp went silent as they entered. Then someone started clapping, slow, rhythmic. Another joined in, then another within seconds. The entire camp, mechanics, infantry, comms, intel, was applauding. Not just for survival, for transformation that night. The inspection team filed their report. One line stood out: unconventional leadership, unorthodox methods, exceptional results. Mills sat alone on her cot afterward, peeling off boots she hadn't unlaced in 16 hours. Her body ached. Her hands trembled faintly, though she wouldn't admit it. She reached into her footlocker, pulled out the patch, the black fabric. Crimson Cross, 4 tally marks, the number 8. For weeks, she had refused to wear it. Too much weight, too much meaning. But tonight, she didn't hesitate. She pressed it against her sleeve. Not for show, not for pride, not even for herself, for her medics. So they would know it was real, so they would believe they could be more. The next morning, when she stepped into the yard, the medics froze. Their eyes caught the patch stitched to her arm. No one spoke. They didn't need to, because now they knew. 8 wasn't a rumor. 8 was real. And 8 was theirs. Why did the letter have no name? It appeared one morning without warning. No courier, no explanation. Just a folded envelope left neatly on her cot. The paper smudged with dust. Her last name written in small, careful letters across the front. Mills. Noticed it right away. She always noticed everything, but she didn't open it. Not immediately. She slid it into her chest pocket and carried on as if it didn't exist. She trained the medics. She scrubbed the instruments. She inventoried the gauze and sutures with her usual obsessive precision. But the envelope weighed heavier than the supplies. That night, when the camp quieted and only the hum of generators filled the desert air, she took the letter outside. She sat beneath a tower light, the same one she had bled under months ago, when her vest had been torn open and she gritted through the pain alone. She unfolded the paper slowly. The handwriting was clean, neat, not typed, not military. You saved my brother. You don't know me, but I know you. When we were told he was hit, we were preparing for a funeral, not recovery. They said if you'd been 30 seconds slower, he'd be gone. He told me you walked through fire. I don't know what you are, but I know this. You're the reason my mom still smiles. Thank you. There was no name at the bottom. Just one line, keep going, even if they don't clap. Words landed heavier than any metal ever could. She folded it carefully, slid it back into her pocket, and sat beneath the tower light until the desert turned cold. The next morning, she moved as always, running before dawn, training medics until sweat turned the dirt into mud. But something was different. The letter's words pulsed like a second. Heartbeat. Her team was sharper now, faster. They didn't freeze when blood gushed from a wound. They didn't panic when chaos surged. They acted. They led. Because she had taught them that hesitation killed. Private Vance, once timid and unsure, now barked orders like a seasoned NCO when his partner bled out in drills. Reza, who had once looked fragile under pressure, now moved like her hands were extensions of steel. Even Dunlop admitted it one evening, his coffee steaming in the cool air. They're not just medics anymore, he said quietly, watching them drill. They're soldiers who heal. Mills didn't answer. She didn't need to, but not everyone was impressed. Word of her program reached higher headquarters, and with it came pressure. The directive was subtle, wrapped in polite orders and clipped phrases. Maintain normal operations, no deviation from doctrine. Ensure all medics adhere to standard training protocols. Translation: stop whatever rogue program you've started before it causes embarrassment. Mills wasn't surprised. She'd seen it before. The brass liked innovation until it challenged tradition. Her drills weren't in the manuals. Her nickname wasn't in the handbooks, and the Army didn't like what it couldn't explain. When the CO confronted her in the armory, his voice carried the weight of that pressure. They're saying you're turning medics into fighters, she shrugged. I'm turning them into survivors. They're not combat troops, Mills. They're targets with red crosses. Her gaze didn't waver. Then, they don't want them to come home. The CO's jaw tightened, silence stretched. Finally, he exhaled. Then keep teaching. The inspection team didn't shut her down. The brass didn't pull her out, but the whispers grew louder, and then came the orders. One morning, Command called her in again. This time, it wasn't a reprimand. It wasn't even a question. It was a decision. She was being reassigned, stateside, tasked with creating a combat medic readiness units, MRU, an official program to formalize what she had built in the dirt with sweat and silence. They offered her a promotion. Full warrant, authority, curriculum, resources. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. That evening, she walked to the edge of camp where the sand softened into silence. She sat alone, the letter from the civilian folded in her hand. The desert stretched endless before her, but her thoughts weren't on the horizon. They were on her team. Back at the med tent, they were waiting. Vance, Reza, Dunlop. The ones who had followed her without question. The ones who had bled and bruised under her training. She told them everything. The silence that followed was heavier than the desert air. Finally, Reza spoke. You going? Mills didn't answer right away. Her throat tightened. Her instinct said no. She didn't want fluorescent lights and endless memos. She wanted dust, blood, the raw urgency of a battlefield. But she also knew the truth. If she didn't go, they'd send someone else, someone without scars, someone who hadn't bled in the dirt. I don't want to, she admitted. Then don't, Vance said quickly, his young eyes desperate. Dunlop shook his head. You don't get it, man. They'll just send someone else. Someone who's not her. Mills looked at their faces she had trained. Voices she had hardened. Hands she had steadied. She sighed. I'll go, but only if you come with me. I'll need instructors. The team exchanged glances. Then they nodded, one by one. 2 weeks later, they boarded a transport plane together. No fanfare, no music. Just the low rumble of engines and a dusty wind whipping across the tarmac. Mills carried only 2 things in her pouch. the patch, and the letter, stateside life hit like a different kind of storm. No explosions, no sirens, no dust in their teeth. Just fluorescent lights, concrete hallways, and endless memos written by people who had never felt the heat of shrapnel. The base was quiet. Too quiet. But she worked anyway. She rebuilt the course. From memory, from scars, from instinct. She created drills not out of textbooks, but out of fire and blood. Broken mannequins became stand-ins for shattered bodies. Sandbags turned into makeshift cover. She taught speed, not protocol. Movement, not memorization. Reflex, not routine. When one colonel scoffed, "This isn't medical training. It's boot camp." She didn't flinch. "Then send them to the field," she said calmly, "and see who makes it home." They didn't argue again. 1 month in, they handed her a class of 20, 10 men, 10 women, all medics, all skeptical. She started with no introductions, no speeches, just silence. Then she pointed to the tallest soldier. "Try to take me down." He laughed, lunged. He never touched her. 8 seconds later, he was pinned, breathless, red-faced in the dirt. The class went silent. "Welcome," she said, her voice steady, "to the war you didn't train for until now." Why did the room fall silent when she walked in? It wasn't because of her rank. It wasn't because of medals or ribbons. She still wore none. It was because every soldier in that room had already heard the stories. Some whispered she was a ghost. Others swore she was a storm. But what they all knew was simple. The woman standing in front of them could take down a man twice her size in 8 seconds flat. 20 trainees stood in attention. 10 men, 10 women, all medics, all skeptical. Mills said nothing at first. She paced slowly across the mat, her boots echoing on the floor. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Some shifted nervously, waiting for instructions. Others smirked, thinking the rumors exaggerated. She pointed to the tallest in the room. "Try to take me down." He chuckled, stepped forward, lunged with confidence. 8 seconds later, he was on his back, winded, staring at the ceiling while the others stared at her. "Welcome," she said, quietly, "to the war you didn't train for until now." From that day on, the program was relentless. She drilled them in speed under pressure, triage with bullets flying, tourniquets applied while smoke grenades filled the air, disarms against mock attackers, improvised shields made from stretchers and packs. She didn't let them freeze, didn't let them excuse mistakes. "Every second you hesitate, someone dies," she told them. Every second. At first they broke. A private vomited during the 3rd day of drills. Another burst into tears after failing to stop a simulated bleed. Mills didn't comfort them. She didn't yell either. She simply repeated, "Do it again." And slowly they hardened. Private Sierra, a young woman barely 20, was the first to transform. She had arrived timid, eyes down, shoulders curled, but Mills watched her one evening, long after class, practicing disarms alone in the dirt. Sierra didn't notice Mills standing in the shadows. Watching, Mills didn't interrupt. She only smiled faintly, because she knew the next generation was already waking up different. The program grew faster than anyone expected. Other bases requested training. Command reluctantly approved expansions. Word spread about the Combat Medic Readiness Unit, about the ghost who teaches survival. But Mills didn't seek recognition. She pinned a single thing to her mirror each night before she collapsed onto her bunk. The letter from the civilian. "Keep going, even if they don't clap." Those words mattered more than any commendation. And yet, part of her ached. The classroom wasn't a battlefield. The mats weren't sand and blood. Fluorescent lights couldn't mimic the sting of smoke or the deafening crack of real gunfire. She missed the urgency, the grit, the storm. Dunlop noticed it first. He had joined her stateside, still her steady shadow, her sounding board when she bothered to speak. One night, as the last trainees filed out, he dropped beside her on the bench, handing her a bottle of water. "You look restless," he said. She didn't answer. "You miss it, don't you?" Her eyes lingered on the mats. "The noise, the dirt, the ones who need you most. I miss showing up where it matters." Dunlop took a long drink. "You matter here." She didn't reply. But silence was an answer too. Weeks blurred into months. Classes cycled through. Trainees broke. Hardened, graduated, Mills taught. Corrected, drilled, always steady, always silent. Her legend grew. Soldiers who had never met her whispered about 8 like she was myth. And then, one night, her phone buzzed. A single message from Dunlop. "Mission coming up, you in?" Her fingers hovered over the screen. Part of her wanted to say no. She had grown used to the control of classrooms, the rhythm of training mats, but another part remembered the heat of a battlefield, the faces of soldiers on the edge of death. The letter that had said she was the reason someone's mother still smiled. She typed back one word: always. Days later, she was back on a tarmac, gear strapped tight, the night air humming with the blades of helicopters. Her team was smaller now, hand-picked veterans trained under her own program. Medics who had once been trainees now stood beside her, steady-eyed, ready. This wasn't a drill. This was combat. Intel confirmed a high-value target deep inside hostile territory. Extraction would be brutal, casualties likely. As the helicopter cut through the darkness, Mills felt the familiar calm settle over her. Not adrenaline, not fear. Calm. When the firefight erupted, it was chaos bullets slicing the night, explosions cracking the ground, soldiers scrambled. For cover, medics sprinted where others hesitated. Mills was in the center of it all. She found the wounded fast. One soldier with shrapnel lodged deep in his chest. Another with a femur shattered by gunfire. Her hands moved like memory packing, sealing, stabilizing. This time, she wasn't alone. Her team worked with precision. Every medic a reflection of the lessons she had hammered into them. Tourniquet now. Airway. Clear. Drag him back. Their voices cut through the gunfire, steady, sharp. For once, Mills didn't have to do everything. For once. She saw her own storm reflected in others. A young corporal cried out, "Medic! Over here!" She sprinted through smoke and fire, reaching him just as sniper fire cracked overhead. The soldier was pale, bleeding fast. Mills dropped low, clamping his wound, securing his airway, barking coordinates into the radio. The firefight roared around them, but her focus never wavered. When the helicopter finally lifted them out, her team loaded the wounded with a speed that would have seemed impossible months ago. Soldiers were bloodied, exhausted, but alive, back at base. The commanding officer approached her on the tarmac. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. He just nodded once, a look of respect that said everything. Later, Dunlop clapped her on the shoulder. "You're still a storm," he said quietly. She gave a faint smile. "I don't have to be." But deep down, she knew she always would be. Because even though she had become a teacher, a mentor, a legend whispered across faces, she was still what she had always been, the one who showed up. Why were soldiers wearing her patch, even though it wasn't allowed? At first, it was just one helmet. A chalk-drawn cross with 4 tally marks and a red number 8 smudged across the back. No one admitted who had drawn it, but within days, it appeared again, this time stenciled on a field bag, then scrawled on the inside flap of body armor. It wasn't sanctioned, it wasn't issued, but it spread. Not because of orders, because of respect. The patch wasn't just for her anymore. It was for what she had built. For every medic who had been told their job was to heal, not fight yet, who now knew they could do both. For every quiet soldier who understood that invisibility didn't mean weakness. She never encouraged it. She never wore it herself. Not at first, but she noticed. She noticed the way medics carried themselves differently. Not arrogant, not reckless, just steady. Ready in the training yard, she heard new voices, not hers. The voices of her students, now teachers themselves, repeating the same words she had drilled into them under dust and sweat. You don't freeze. You don't panic. You move. Her lessons were no longer hers alone. The CO noticed, too. He pulled her into his office one morning, his desk buried under paperwork he barely looked at. You've started something, he said. Mills stayed silent. It's not official. It's not in the manuals, but it's working. Medics are sharper. Infantry trust them. Cross-unit respect is up. Hell, even special forces have been asking about your program. She stood motionless. He leaned forward. I want to formalize it, make it army-wide, build a combat medic readiness program. You'd lead it. Her jaw tightened. I didn't come here to teach. No, Basio admitted. You came to serve, and you did. And now, they need more than a medic. They need someone to show them how to survive. She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched. Finally, she exhaled. All right. That afternoon, a bulletin went up on the board. Close quarter combat for medics. Lead instructor, SGT, Mills, voluntary, 600 hours. Training yard C. Be the reason someone lives, or the reason someone never gets the chance to take a life. The first session had 7 people. The next, 15. Within a month, half the medical corps was there before sunrise. Some dragged their boots reluctantly. Others moved with purpose. But all of them came. Every session began with the same words. You're not just healers, you're battlefield ghosts. You move where bullets fly, and you patch what no one else can. You don't get to freeze. You don't get to panic, because the second you do, someone dies. They never forgot those words, because they weren't from a manual. They were from someone who had lived it. And slowly, the program grew beyond the yard. Infantry soldiers started showing up, asking if they could join. At first, Mills refused, but Dunlop reminded her quietly, if they want to learn, let them. It only makes them stronger. So she let them. Soon, the line between healer and fighter blurred. Late one evening, as drills ended and sweat-drenched soldiers stumbled toward the showers, Mills sat alone on the training mat. The yard was quiet. Dust still hung in the floodlights like ghosts. Dunlop approached with 2 bottles of water, handing her one before sitting beside her. Didn't think you'd say yes to the program, he said. Neither did I. He cracked his bottle open. I hear they're calling you 8 now, everywhere. She took a sip, her throat dry. You like it? He chuckled. Doesn't matter what I like, do you? She thought for a long moment, eyes drifting to the patch some soldier had scrawled on the corner of the mat. It's not who I am, she said. It's what I did. Dunlop nodded. Fair. But what you did changed everything. Her gaze lingered on the patch. They see a number, not the years, not the nights, not the blood. No. Dunlop agreed. But they're learning, because of you. She didn't respond. Instead, she thought of her grandfather's photo, his steel gray eyes, the war medal pinned crookily to his chest, the man who had taught her silence, patience, precision. And she wondered if this was what he had meant by legacy. Not medals, not stories, but the faces of those who carried your lessons forward. Weeks passed. The program became too big to ignore. Command filed reports, inspection teams visited. Bureaucrats frowned at her methods but couldn't deny the results. Morale was higher than ever. Combat response times dropped, survival rates climbed. And the patch, the quiet, unsanctioned patch, was everywhere. On notebooks, on rucksacks, carved into the wooden bunk frames of barracks. It wasn't an emblem of her strength. It was an emblem of survival, of resilience. Late one night, Dunlop found her sitting on her cot, staring at the folded letter pinned to her mirror. You think about legacy much? He asked. She didn't look up. Legacy doesn't stop bleeding. He smiled faintly. No, but it makes people show up. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a small, tired smile. Because maybe legacy wasn't about being remembered. Maybe it was about making sure others remembered what mattered. And for Mills, that had always been simple. Not the medals, not the patches, not the name. Just the wounded, the dying, the ones who couldn't fight for themselves. She had become more than a medic, more than a ghost, more than eight. She had become a legacy carried in silence. Why did she say yes one last time? The message came at dawn, buzzing her phone as she laced her boots in the dim light of her quarters. A simple text from Dunlop. Mission coming up, you in? Her fingers hovered over the screen. She could have said no. She could have stayed behind, safe, in classrooms and training yards, surrounded by maths and chalkboard lessons. But she remembered the letter pinned to her mirror, the one that told her to keep going even if no one clapped. She typed back one word. Always. Days later, she was back on a tarmac. The hum of helicopter blades cut through the night as her team veteran she had trained herself, loaded gear, and checked weapons. No fanfare, no cameras, just a quiet ritual of soldiers heading into fire. The mission was brutal. A high-value target deep inside hostile territory, surrounded by enemy forces. Extraction was expected to be ugly. Casualties likely. As the helicopter descended, Mills felt the calm settle over her again. That strange, steady silence that always came before chaos. When the firefight erupted, it was immediate. Bullets carved the night. Explosions ripped the ground. Voices shouted in the dark. Her team didn't hesitate. They moved like shadows, dragging the wounded into cover, stabilizing them under fire, barking commands that cut through the storm. Every movement was muscle memory. Every breath, a rhythm she had drilled into them at dawn in dust and sweat. Mills was everywhere at once, clamping a chest wound, sealing a shrapnel tear, hauling a man twice her size behind cover. Her hands never trembled, her voice never broke, and for the first time, she realized something. She didn't have to be the storm anymore, because the storm was all around her. Her team had become what she had once carried alone. By the time the helicopters lifted them out, soldiers were alive who should have been dead. Medics stood steady who once would have frozen. Back at base, as stretchers unloaded and reports filed, Mills slipped into the shadows. She didn't crave the debriefs. She didn't want the applause. She wanted the silence of knowing they had done their job. Later that night, Dunlop found her sitting alone again. He clapped her on the shoulder, heavy but warm. "You're still the storm," he said softly. She gave the faintest smile. "Not anymore, now they are." Weeks passed. The combat medic readiness unit spread wider. Other bases adopted her drills. Other instructors carried her words. The patch appeared in places she had never been, drawn in chalk, stitched into fabric, etched into steel. Her name turned into a legend whispered in barracks. 8. The medic who could heal with her hands or break you with them. The ghost who trained an army of healers to survive hell. One afternoon, she received a package. Inside was a framed photo of her grandfather, steel gray eyes staring back at her. Below it, a note written in a careful hand. "You are the healing hands and the fierce heart. Your fight is his legacy." She touched the frame gently, her throat tight. Her journey had come full circle. She was no longer the invisible medic in the corner of a tent. No longer just the girl in scrubs no one noticed. She was the one who showed up. The one who turned silence into power, hesitation into survival, ghosts into guardians. But she never sought fame. She never wanted the spotlight. She simply wanted to prepare those who would walk into fire and come back alive. And as she folded the patch into her hand one final time, she understood what all of it meant. Legacy wasn't loud. It wasn't medals or speeches or applause. Legacy was quiet. It was carried in steady hands, in unshaken hearts, in the lives saved by those who remembered what she had taught. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.